Welcome to Rapid Harmony. I'm Kyle Emmanuel Brown. This is a space for high-achieving souls who want more than outcomes. You want resonance, you want truth, you want a life that moves with purpose instead of pressure. Here, we explore success with the soul and direction with depth. We slow things down just enough to hear your own wisdom again. We breathe, we question, we remember the part of you that never needed permission to leave. Every conversation is an invitation to trust yourself more than the noise around you, and live from that clarity that rises when you stop forcing and start listening. Take a breath, settle in, let's begin. So James, you became the CEO of one of the most influential conscious media companies on the planet. And most people, they would just cling to that. But you're the guy that follows your internal guidance system. And I know you've got this new calling. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, how I got the role is somewhat of an accident, which is a bit of a longer story. But I think all of us have had calls from the universe. And as my life has progressed, I've found it harder to hang up on those calls. I got another call, I listened, and now I'm following that.
Well, for those of you who aren't too familiar with James's journey, I think it is one of the most fascinating stories of, I'll say, being in the barrel, so to speak, as a surfer. So, you come from a background of chasing waves, and that then turned you into the path of a filmmaker. You're telling stories that really helped shape this global wellness movement. And then you stepped into leadership at Gaia, which is arguably the largest conscious media platform in the world. And this new calling, what you're building, it's like a certification school to help people really turn conscious living into real careers and real impact. And, that's quite the evolution, but I want to rewind the tape a little bit right now. And I want to hear a little bit about, when you look back at your surfer days, what was it do you feel like you were really searching for back then?
Well, growing up in a small beach town in Australia, I had the ultimate life. I was surfing every day, sometimes before school, most every day after school. Nice. And then ended up playing in a punk rock band, which we were playing a lot of gigs. We had an album, a few singles out. And so surfing, playing in a band, I'm like, I want nothing else. This is perfect. And it was my dad who said, you need to get a job. And you can't just be a musician and a surfer your whole life. And he'd been a musician and it didn't work out for him. So he was somewhat imparting his story on me. And so he said, do you want to take over my accounting practice? And I'm sitting in the ocean and playing gigs. Do I want to go sit in an office as an accountant? Of course, my answer was no.
Right.
And he said, well, why don't you think about a career at sea? And he had clients that were ship's captains. So I did a test voyage on a container ship with a captain friend of his. Loved it. It was exciting. It was adventurous. So I said yes. And then I spent the next 5 to 7 years studying and eventually becoming one of the youngest qualified ship's officers on the Australian coast. 23 years old, I was an officer navigating a 250 meter long passenger ferry with 1,300 passengers, 250 cars. And traveling the world, Middle East, Asia, experiencing a lot very fast. So it was a big wake-up call.
That's wild. So first off, what instrument were you playing back in the day?
I was playing guitar. So I'd write music, playing guitar, and I felt surfing and music were very artistic expressions. You're dancing in the ocean, you're writing music, and that artist in me eventually came back out. I locked it up to go to sea, to become a ship's captain. And then after working in that industry for a while, it started to rear its head, and that's it.
So while you're at sea, and you've got this inner artist going, were you able to hop on a mic and entertain people in some capacity? Or was it really just left brain, keep to yourself? Like, where was that artistic expression during that time in your young 20s?
It was locked up. I wasn't allowed to express it in a way. I mean, if you're, a navigating officer on a vessel. I worked for 2 of the top 10 wealthiest people in the world at the time.
Wow.
King of Qatar, on his private yachts, he had 4, one for each wife. And then, the co-founder of Microsoft, and he had multiple yachts, 2 helicopters, these sort of things. And so it was not really a place for artistic expression, and keeping it bottled up for 7 years was something that, it came out eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You can only contain it at that level. So you're watching these people live these, some of the wealthiest people in the world, and you're watching them live at the highest level of, we'll call it 2-dimensional success, external, the bank accounts and everything. Where did you feel internal dissonance when you were watching that?
Well, I think some of the biggest things that stood out to me was that money doesn't equal happiness, and money doesn't equal fulfillment. And I was doing a lot of Tony Robbins work at the time,
nice.
Reading a lot, studying a lot. This is where I started to study nutrition. My dad was unwell. He was on multiple medications. So all of these sort of meeting points coming together was sort of, came to a point where I realized that I needed to go and follow a different path, and money also doesn't equal health. These people had access to the most resources in the world. I'm talking, unfathomable, like the highest level. And yet they were struggling with conditions that were debilitating them. And I was seeing what they were eating and looking at their health, and it was obscure to me as someone who had started to take an interest in nutrition and natural therapies to see how disconnected they were from the natural world. And there's this quote, and I'm sure you've heard it: if you have your health, you have 1,000 goals. And if you don't have your health, you have 1 goal.
That's right.
And each of these people were top 10 wealthiest people in the world. A Middle Eastern sheikh and a captain of an industry that defined the modern era of technology. And yet they struggled immensely with their physical health. And it made me realize that all the money in the world is not going to make you healthy, happy, fulfilled. And so it started to awaken a different sort of desire in me to follow a different path.
So one thing you and I share in common is a lot of stuff that has slowly become trendy and turned into viral clips like, hey, drink beet juice. we both got into this industry where most of the things that get talked about now at that time were one step away from having you, killed at the stake for being crazy and out of your mind thinking this is the way we need to eat food. So where did it then link up to the natural health world, at a time where natural health was not in vogue?
Well, I think one of the things was, after a Tony Robbins event I went to, they started to talk about health and diet. And I'm like, this is interesting. Why haven't I ever been sort of told about this, right? And then at the same time, my father, who had, followed his progression as an accountant and had his own practice, was doing real estate development and was very successful on paper, was getting sicker and sicker. Chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, anxiety, eventually had to leave his career, and he moved to Fiji, where he sort of quote unquote retired, but was healing, but healing in the sense of mainstream medicine, which was on 6 different medications, changing the cocktail, hoping that one day he'd get better. And so he's there on this island, unwell, 50 pounds overweight, been 5 years practically bedridden, and no hope of getting well. And meanwhile, I'm working with these super wealthy elite who are also sick and unwell. And I'm studying nutrition online, going, wait, there is a really simple answer here. And how is it that nobody is seeing this? How is it that nobody is awakened to this basic knowledge of how to nourish yourself and detox your body and sort of understand the root cause of chronic illness? And so that eventually sort of led to us wanting to, quit and then go and help him. And it was a big shift,
And so what problem was it that you were trying to solve when that grew into Food Matters? Was it, I want to take all this information, understand it, apply it to my dad, and then now spread the information like the gospel to the people? Or was it more like I want to go really granular into the individual's health and biochem. Like what, based on your background, what was the original pull?
So, I mean, I had a background in navigation,
Yeah.
and shipping. So I had no background in biochemistry or nutritional science, but I did an online certification, which gave me quite an enormous amount of knowledge. And
Yeah.
I tried to share this with my father. I'm like, hey, Dad, check this out. Read this paper, read this blog, read this article. He wouldn't trust me because he's like, you're not a doctor, you're not my doctor. So I thought, okay, well, the next opportunity is, why don't we, and this was my partner at the time, why don't we go interview all these experts we've been studying, put it, take this footage to him and say, hey, here's what these experts are saying. Listen to them, don't listen to us. And like you said, a lot of this knowledge didn't exist. This was 2007, 2008.
Right.
This was like
It's not common.
No. And I mean, even some of our family members were saying, like, good luck with that goji berry movie, all this sort of stuff. Like, that was before it went into 13 languages and Netflix picked it up. But essentially, we had this footage and we thought, well, if he's not listening to us, why don't we take him this footage, as we say in Australia, rock up on his front door,
nice.
And then say, hey, sit down, let's listen to this together, and sort of create somewhat of an intervention. And that's the intention behind it.
Let's level this up to the consciousness path, and everything happens for a reason. Do you feel like maybe on a soul level, your dad and you had some form of a contract that his stubbornness would then lead you into this level of exploration?
Well, of course. And I say of course because I think that the universe is constantly conspiring for us to connect with our deeper purpose and our mission.
Yeah.
And the more we ignore it, the more pain we're in. The more we step into it, the more joy and the more flow that we experience. And, that was one of the first big phone calls I got from the universe. It was like, hey, follow this. Yes. Like the white rabbit in the Matrix. It's like, follow the rabbit. This is it. And so that meant leaving a comfortable job. That meant leaving tax-free money. That meant leaving, free diving in the Red Sea and surfing in Oman and like going on helicopters in the Caribbean. That meant giving up this entire lifestyle. And instead of buying a house, taking all that money and investing it into a movie to help my dad get well. I mean, people thought we were crazy.
Yeah. Well, you have to be a little bit crazy to change the world, right?
Yeah.
And I will say diving in the Red Sea is top 5 coolest things I've ever done in my life. It was like stepping into an aquarium.
It's insane.
I can't get over the color in there. It's so maybe 2 colors up above, right? It's not like this big lush area like parts of Australia, and then boom, you're under. It's amazing. I'm curious, as far as wellness being on the fringe and being a bit of a trendsetter. So you're following the navigation of ships and then you tune it towards a new true north. You're moving this place and you're thinking about, okay, I want to get this movie out to my dad and I'm going to convince dad. When did that then shift to, hey, let's level this up and I want to influence millions?
So I don't think we were actually even asking that question. Initially, the first step was we knew that this information didn't really exist at the time. And so we wanted to take this to my father. But then there was this idea that we'll do like a 12 DVD learning series and we'll have this very boring like seminar circuit and sell people in the back of the room of a 12 DVD pack. It wasn't until after helping him, and we helped him within 3 months. He was off all his meds, lost 50 pounds, totally back to normal. He got better with this protocol, which was quite a simple protocol, like cut out the bad stuff, more of the good stuff, a lot of love and compassion and rest and detoxification, and mostly getting him off his medications, which were causing a cycle of deepening symptomatology. But then we took this footage to Sydney and we were touching base with some editors and co-producers, and one of them said, I don't do short form content. I don't do long form. You should speak to this guy. He does long form. We took it to this guy. We showed him some of the footage. His name's Enzo Tedeschi. He's been a part of all 5 of our documentaries now. And he said, guys, you have a really serious documentary on your hands here. You realize you're like uncovering deep ethical issues with the pharmaceutical industry,
Right.
the agrochemical industry. You're dismantling these industries with a very, very, very clean sort of discussion and showing an alternate path for people. This is going to be huge. And so he sort of convinced us of this.
Nice.
And having helped my father, he helped back the project. And I call it Bank of Roy. It's his name.
Nice.
He helped fund the project, and that eventually is sort of what spurred us into creating the film.
Amazing. And where I'm curious is, with that experience, like you said, you're going up against some pretty big players in some capacity who monetize on monthly reoccurring revenue from monthly reoccurring agony, right? And you're giving your father and others the antithesis, which is autonomy. How did you feel navigating that, knowing like, yes, I have this truth, but this can affect things with the pharmaceutical industry, the agriculture industry, and these multi-billion-dollar players?
Well, we didn't typically go and target broadcasters and mainstream media and cinematic release. We just said, let's start at the grassroots. Let's introduce this to the people. The Secret had just come out, so like online movies was becoming a thing. So we'd start to do free screening events, and then we encourage people to hold screenings of the movie in different locations, so they'd have people to come and do that. And through that process, then we started to get on the radar of some bigger players. And Netflix said they wanted to take the movie, and this was very early on. We were doing the DVD home delivery at the time, and then they said, "Oh, we want to put it on our digital platform," and so we did that, and it then started to go pretty crazy at that point, and was quickly in 13 different languages within 12 months. We're touring France, we're touring Japan. We are traveling around the world doing screenings of the movie, and it was really taking off.
So with a collaborative partner like that for distribution, did that give you both joy and a little bit of relief of like, hey, I'm collaborated with this big brand that I'm bringing this stuff out versus I'm just trying to be out here doing this myself?
Yeah, I think it gave us a sense of feeling of, it gave the work some credibility,
right,
and also a little bit of protection.
Nice.
And I think Michael Moore did a lot of work to help the independent filmmaker, or this concept of cinema verite, or freedom through cinema. I mean, he made a movie about a sitting president of the United States, and it crushed it in the box office. And to me, that signaled an era where people were able to create documentaries that question quote unquote truths about our existence, and publish it en masse and not get killed, and so
that's true.
I think that the era was, or the path was, opened by people like Michael Moore, and then we just had a particular vertical we were going after, like the agrochemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the food processing industry. And at that stage, no one was really talking about it. I mean, people used to think naturopaths wore sweatpants and held crystals in their backyard.
That's right.
And now, natural medicine doctors, functional medicine practitioners, they're expensive and the gold standard. But goji berries, raw food, paleo, vegan, detox, juicing were not really on the radar, in 2008. I mean, this was
not at all. Well, what was something specifically that you found in the natural health space that made you just kind of stop in your tracks and say, this is really off the path, a little bit weird, but a super cool food or plant or something? Like, what did you find at one time? Like, was there anything that kind of knocked your socks off?
Well, I mean, one of the most influential interviews I did at that stage was with David Wolf, and he was a bit of a superstar at this stage. And I think we ended up capturing one of his best interviews ever. And he even told me after the fact, he said, "James, I was in Russia one day on a train, and someone came up to me and said, 'David Wolf, food matters.'" And so and then we met with the guys at NutriBullet from Capital Brands, and they said they watched Food Matters and then signed him to do the NutriBullet commercials, of which he was on the face of this blender for years on TV. And so, his interview was super impactful at the time. I mean, he was at the forefront of bringing these indigenous, wild, native foods from these far-flung territories around the world to the West and calling them quote-unquote superfoods, right? And so, raw cacao was, a super powerful food. Spirulina was like insane. It was like these foods hadn't really seen the light of day in the West. And he was bringing them in, and we were trying them and putting them in smoothies and experimenting with them. And it was like, wow, this is like nature's multivitamin in a way, these sort of compounds. And if you eat them and you introduce them to your diet, you can experience the effects it's having almost immediately.
I love that. So 2003 to 2005, I'm working on formulation of Fit 365 and came across organic cacao, and there weren't any shakes with organic cacao in it. And I had to deal with all these issues on the labels of cacao versus cocoa. They kept trying to change it. I'm like, no, this is medicinal cacao. And what we called it, because we're like, what do we call this thing as we're creating it? And we came up with the concept of weight management superfood. And nobody had heard of the term superfood. So there's like, what's this?
Yeah.
And one of the ingredients was one of the sweeteners we were using was Lohangwo fruit extract.
Yeah.
And nobody had come up with the word monk fruit yet,
exactly.
Which sounds so much safer than saying the word Chinese medicinal fruit.
Yeah. I mean, we are, these foods are now entered the mainstream, and it was not that long ago that they weren't even here,
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing to be a pioneer, and you had that pioneer energy and bringing these things, and you're also aligning with people who the mainstream would throw darts at. So as you were coming out with all this natural health stuff with Food Matters, when you were out and about, did you feel embraced? Did you feel threatened? Did people think you were a quack? What kind of energy were you getting where you were?
Well, I mean, first of all, we were not really, and certainly I was not really a part of the documentary. A lot of people like to put themselves in the movie. It's like their story, follow me. And I didn't really feel that was my path. I didn't want to get any personal ego branding gain from this. And, I think that's changed now. I feel a lot more confident to speak my truth. But back then, I was happy for these experts to take the brunt of it. The people who followed us, they knew us, and we didn't experience much, pushback. There was one time we were booked, in Canada, we went on a lot of shows, breakfast shows. We got on airlines like Singapore Airlines, Air New Zealand was picking up the film. Canal Plus put it into French and broadcast it, to all of the French speaking nations. And there was one time we got booked on Good Morning America, and we were about to fly out to New York to do it. And the producer contacted us and said, Legal has canceled the segment. And, that meant clearly one thing. You're going to piss off our sponsors because you're essentially saying drugs are bad, food is good.
That's right.
And if you look at TV commercials in the US, they drive the vast majority of advertising revenue of the major networks. And so there's a clear conflict there. So the producer loved it. They wanted us on. They're like, yeah, let's go. This is amazing. It's such a timely message. People need to know this. Legal, canceled it.
So for those listening at home that maybe haven't fully caught up to where you and I are at, where we're kind of like, duh, and all others like, huh? I want to fill in the gap a little bit here, which is one, some of the main sponsors are the food companies that are leading people down a path of not eating real food. And secondarily, the pharmaceutical side of that, which is it us and New Zealand, I think, are the two only countries that can advertise pharmaceutical and tell you to go tell your doctor what's that. Is it that they were worried about is like, okay, both of our major revenue sources are creating an issue? It seems like that could be one of the biggest problems.
Well, they never said. They said legal, but double click on that.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So legal's job is to keep them keeping their people happy. And
that's right.
And I always just tell people at home, just if you want to do this thing that we used to do in our generation, Gen X, we used to do, it's called analytical thinking. I know it's not done much these days. We would look at things through a lens of follow the money. And a lot of times when you're following the money, it creates a much easier paper trail. And it's really fascinating to me that, again, you think punk rock band, let's go back to the beginning of the journey. Punk rock band, it's, I want to be in the forefront in the limelight, or I want to play music. So was there a time, and then when you're on the boat, it's follow the systems, navigate, keep quiet, pay attention, and, yes, sir, and suppress creative expression. You did not want to be that superstar on the forefront when you're creating these documentaries. Your nature as a kid, was it the I want to go here, or was it, you know, somebody who could suppress the ego a little bit? I'm just very curious, especially coming from a family of somebody who was a punk rocker.
Well, I think, you know, my punk rock roots were really about questioning everything. If you
Right.
think about some of the bands that I look up to the most, the pinnacle would be Propaganda. And it's, you know, lead singer is Chris Hanna and Todd and Jord, incredible band out of Canada. And they were literally talking about, you know, systems of control and power structures and why we eat a certain way and asking all these really big questions about society. You know, their songs would open with a quote from Noam Chomsky, and then it would go into this whole, you know, diatribe about, you know, governments and control. And to me, from a young age, I was listening to this going, wow, this is amazing. This is so inspirational. Like, why are we not questioning everything? And so I think this part of me, from like an internal family systems perspective, was ripe and developed, and like I wanted to question everything. Why do we do what we do? You know, and then, you know, going to Tony Robbins, it was like, why do we have the beliefs we have? And I'm like, yeah, this makes no sense, you know. So going into shipping, it was like I had to lock that part of me up. But then moving back into the art of filmmaking and then entrepreneurship, I was able to take this energy and go and, you know, birth it to the world in a new way. And in the credits, I thank Chris Hanna from Propaganda. I sent him a copy. He's like, this is so awesome.
Oh, okay.
I included, you know, independent artists for their tracks in the first two, well, actually the 3 of the 5 movies I've made. So John Butler Trio is an Australian artist. They've got 2 of his commercial tracks for the first 2 movies. And then Nick Broadhurst, a dear friend of mine, he's a commercial artist, and for the Transcendence season 1. And so this idea of unlocking this question anything sort of punk rock archetype that lived within me was sort of what birthed a lot of the films and the businesses that I've since built.
And that went from, you know, anti-establishmentarianism into, you know, questioning food. Where did it shift from questioning food to questioning existence and consciousness?
Well, I mean, at the very sort of underpinning my sort of journey was a spiritual awakening as well, which I think is common for most sort of conscious entrepreneurs. There's this questioning everything, and then there's like, what's this energy I'm experiencing, and so forth. And then the second movie was Hungry for Change, and it was about, you know, the diet industry and all this sort of crap. And again, Netflix picked it up, and then it was at the Whole Foods checkout for like 6 months in the US, everyone around the US. And then it also went into multiple languages. And then next came, you know, this Transcendence docuseries. And this is where we started to step deeper into, you know, beyond food. And we interviewed people like Novak Djokovic, this world-class tennis player, and Wim Hof and Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton, and these incredible thinkers that were reshaping sort of modern thoughts around how our frequency becomes our experience.
Right.
And when sort of built on this foundation of, okay, you got your nutrition right, but now it's time to question how you think about yourself and reality, then that sort of led us to a deeper path of producing more content in that area. And then ultimately building a sort of a Netflix for health and wellness. It was the first concept of its type, and that's where those Transcendence docuseries content lived.
Awesome. And the consciousness side of that, you know, the linking up of weight, if everything is vibration, so is my food, and higher vibration foods. Did you start to look almost from an ikigai perspective of all of these parts of me are all coming together into one?
It felt as if that. I mean, there's stories of people that live to 100 and smoke every other day.
Right.
And there's stories of people that live to 70 and eat perfect. What is the difference? Well, the repetitive pattern of thought that person has, and also their relationship to pressure and urgency, aka stress, is the differentiating factor. And making all things equal, toxic load, environment, etc. And so that then begs the question, well, what's more important, the mind or the body? And I don't know that there's an exact answer, but there is an interconnection of sorts. And then as you start to explore that, you start to explore, well, what is the mind? What is thought? And what is consciousness? And you're like, well, it's non-local. That's one thing they figured out. So if it doesn't live within the brain, then it lives within this sort of invisible net that we're all a part of.
Yeah.
Like heart math, you walk into a room, two people are sitting there, they've been fighting just before you walked in, but they sit there with a smile on their face. You can feel it.
Yeah, that's right.
Because your heart has this sort of 12 to 14 foot field that it can feel perfectly. So as you start to make yourself aware of that, and then you study extrasensory perception, you're like, military soldiers were trained in ESP so that they could sit behind a rock and know where the bullets were coming from, because they could tap into the frequency of thought of the opposition, and they could drop into a short meditation, close their eyes and say, run left, and follow that intuition. So to me, then, if thought and consciousness is external, then that opens up a whole different can of worms about who we are, what it means to live a high quality life, and how to use that energy to sort of call in a deeper experience.
And labels has been a really interesting thing for me. There's part where I was like, well, I'm paleo. This is before paleo became a thing. And then once it became a thing, I'm like, oh, I'm not paleo. I'm not just sitting around eating bacon all day long. And started moving through labels. And I think where I've landed, one is laughing at labels, but then secondarily, I would say the closest thing would be qualitarian. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that fits in with food and transformation, everything. And, I've been in the transformation space coaching wise for 25 years. And one thing that I always thought was really funny is at first everyone's like, the weights are like 70, 90% of it. So let's say the number 70. And then your food is 80 to 90% of it. And then it's 90% mental. So now we're sitting at a circle that is like 4 circles all in one, and it becomes kind of nonsensical. Like, what, 270% out of 100? Doesn't make sense. The unifying factor, I think, on all of that is connection, purpose, your true north. Where is that compass actually taking you? Which could best explain people like that 100-year-old who smokes and eats like crap, and the, person dying at 70 who you're like, well, they were a marathon runner and they ate perfectly. So now that you've been linking all these different pieces together in transcendence, is there one thing that you feel has been one of the most important things to lean into in this whole process, this whole conscious experiment?
Yeah, look, I think that's a $1 million question. It's like, that's like asking for the silver bullet, the magic pill. I mean, I don't know that it exists. I think that if you're looking to create a better quality experience for your life, whether it's better quality relationships, more abundance, more connection, more impact, more purpose, I think that it's actually, a Venn diagram or sort of a Maslow sort of hierarchical type theory. I think first is your hardware. Like, What is your hardware like? And I think people can imagine this if they think about an old Nokia phone versus a brand new iPhone. Yeah. The hardware on a brand new iPhone is far superior than an old Nokia. The thing about our bodies in terms of a metaphor is that we have the opportunity to actually upgrade our hardware every year. We don't have to go to an Apple store. We don't have to line up. We don't have to trade in our old Nokia. We can just literally upgrade our hardware. The way you do that, better inputs, better nutrition, right? Biochemical inputs, very simple. What's in, what's out. That is groundwork, table stakes. The next really is movement. Movement is medicine. If you're not stretching, qigong, energy practices, walking is so underrated. I mean, Dr. Christian Northrup talks about it. 2 laps around the block is more efficient than an antidepressant. I mean, we're sitting on our ass having antidepressants. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Then the next is sleep, the most underrated nutrient, I believe, when it comes to upgrading our hardware. So if you put those 3 together and imagine that's the bottom of this mythical, like, inverted Maslow theory, then that is your hardware. So nutrition, movement, sleep. Once you start getting 6, 7, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 in each of those areas, then you're ready to upgrade the software. This is the apps. This is the software that you run on top of that hardware. Those I seem to think of in sort of 3 type areas. The first one is your beliefs. What do you believe to be real about the universe? We're all brought up with beliefs that are conditioned upon us, mostly from 3rd trimester to 7 years of age. If you believe that life is hard, that things are hard, that money doesn't grow on trees, those things become your reality. if you believe the exact opposite, which is a choice, this is your software and programming, then you experience something completely different. One of my gurus, trainers, mentors was gifted a mantra to one of her disciples.
Mm.
And it was this: everything is absolutely always unfolding perfectly. And so this belief I conditioned into myself.
Right.
Every day I'd just say it out loud for years. And this is the opportunity where once you have good hardware, you can install better quality beliefs. And I think that is the next step on this sort of hierarchical, say, frequency maxing experience of life. The next one above that, so you go nutrition, movement or exercise, sleep, then beliefs. The next one is your intention. So where are you going to focus your intention? They talk about this in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
Yeah.
You know, he's like pulling the bow of his Dharma and aiming it. You know, where are you aiming your attention? What is it that you really want to focus on? And this is typically driven by personal experience. For me, my dad was sick. I wanted to help the world not be in sick and pain.
Right.
And so that became my intention, right? And so I started to focus that intention. And then the final step is aligned action. That's where you take action. And I think the biggest problem people face is they want to change their life and they just go take action. And that's sweet. That's cute. That's nice. But if you're not fixing your hardware, if you're not changing your beliefs, you end up in an infinite loop of, I tried that. It didn't work. Story. You're back to square one. So for me, I think all of these things are intimately connected. And if you're able to sort of play with them, step up through this process, then you can experience a completely different reality. And Bruce Lipton talks about it. It's heaven on earth.
Yeah. I'm in complete alignment. And for me, I put people through this empower process, which is, if you just listen to the whispers throughout time, like be the change you want to see in the world, and then you take that theoretical and you bring it down to the idea of like, there's no good men out there, or there's no good women out there. It's a lot easier as a guy to say there's no good women out there, and not be considered somebody bashing women when I make this next statement, which is I'll sit down when that person comes to me and I'll be like, are you acting like the type of person you'd want to go on a date with?
Yeah.
And if they're just trying to take action of the only action is, well, if I go on more dates and I'm doing this from a quantitative number place, good luck. But if you go like, be the kind of person you'd actually want to be in a long-term relationship with. I heard a comedian this morning, actually. He had said, I was really afraid of dating because, I heard that 50% of all marriages, you're stuck with the person the rest of your life. And it flipped it a little bit on its head.
That's funny.
And I think a lot of that still comes down to that ever evolving, changing, who is the individual you are becoming. And if you don't have that pointing of the arrow, I think you're, to me, you're doing what I would consider the worst criticism of all time is if I went to a 10-year high school reunion, or now at this point, I've got my 40-year high school reunion coming up, and you say, hey, you haven't changed one bit.
Yeah.
I think that's like the ultimate criticism. And for you, I think that's probably part of the pull of this next evolution, which is, a soul school of sorts. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what's calling you with that right now, and what's the vision look like if you were to paint the picture Bob Ross style?
Well, I think, being at Gaia was an extreme honor. I merged one of my TV companies together with Gaia in about 2019 to create the world's largest online conscious media and transformation network. And that grew, in 2019 to today to, over 900,000 subscribers, in 180 different countries around the world. And for the last, almost 3 years, I was in the executive team as CEO there, and spent a number of years on the board and saw a lot of the consciousness and health and transformation industry from a really unique viewpoint. And ultimately what it helped me to experience was that this idea of coming back to my roots. And what was it that caused me to go out into the world and have this unbridled sense of enthusiasm to make change?
Right.
And that was really studying something I was passionate about, formalizing that knowledge, getting the confidence to go and then create something in the world and then birth it. And so I was studying nutrition, I was studying internet business and marketing, and those two things together helped birth, Food Matters, which was seen by tens of millions of people, and then Social grew to millions and millions of people, and then Hungry for Change, which came out and was, in the first month, had over 250,000 people sign up for the online launch, and then Food Matters TV or FMTV grow, and book deals with HarperCollins and Hay House, and all of those things were born out of this desire to focus on something that I was passionate about and start close in. I mean, really, if I think about what I was doing with my father, it was scratching my own itch. I had an itch, I had a problem. My dad was sick, he was unwell. I'm living this grandiose life in the Caribbean and the Middle East and in the Mediterranean. And I'm like, damn, we need to go and help him. We need to fix this. And so that focus eventually opened up this new passion-led, purposeful path in life that I wouldn't have ever imagined. And so education or focused study on something that I was passionate about unlocked this huge world for me. And I think that education is shifting dramatically. We're told to go to university and get a degree, and that is the worst advice you could be given in the modern era. The next sort of path of advice around education and building a life that's purposeful and aligned with your soul is to find something that you're passionate about, that you would study on the weekends, that keeps you up at night, and go and study that and birth something from this desire. And for a lot of people now, it's plant medicine, it's sound healing, it's breath work, it's hormone regulation. And these topics are not typically available. The whole industry is completely fragmented. It's single expert programs. Right. And so the thought is, and this concept is called Wellcademy, is to bring together all of these sort of disciplines under one platform, under an annual subscription and a community, so that people can come, study what they're passionate about, do 2 or 3 certification accredited programs, then have business mentorship and training inside of that to go build more micro businesses. And I'm in this day and age, a techno optimist. I believe that AI is actually going to kill a lot of big businesses and redistribute the business and economic world into small micro businesses. If you think for most of humanity, we were all entrepreneurs, blacksmiths, shoemakers, horse people. And my brother's a horse person. You hate that I said that. What do they do? Agistment, horse agistment, or breaking in horses. And we had these small businesses of, 10, 20, 30 staff. We were connected to this tribe of people. We were doing something that was really impactful and intentional. And since the birth of the internet, 1.0 and 2.0, we've essentially amassed this megalithic technological empires where so much worth is tied up in these Mag 7, right?
That's right.
And I think that what's going to happen is, because the cost of building code, because the cost of creating content is going to zero, more and more people will be able to start businesses that slowly disrupt these huge people on the hill. And ultimately, there'll be a golden era of people starting conscious lifestyle businesses. And this is something that I feel so passionate about supporting people and awakening to.
So I love the idea. And one of the points that you brought up that I want to double down on for people listening at home is, a lot of listeners are these high achieving conscious entrepreneurs with big visions and big missions. And where there's a struggle is this: if I put money first, gosh, I could start up an OnlyFans and pocket an incredible amount of cash, or I could go work Wall Street and monetize, or stocks or whatever. But if I put healing and helping and having this servant's heart, I see all these friends who are in these different things, and what they do is they say, my business isn't working, I'm going to go get another certification. My business still isn't working, I'm going to get another certification. Now they've got 75 certifications but no business. And I love how you're integrating the two of like, okay, find your passion and let's help make sure you actually have the business systems to then bring that stuff to market. Because I think that's one of the biggest problems is, you have the servant's heart, but do you have the entrepreneurial acumen? So I'd love to hear, your story is really rare, I think, in that sense of that you had these passions and you followed the passions and you thought really big and really clear. How is that all linked up for you, and how would you envision yourself putting that into this new project?
Well, I mean, I think I've been very fortunate enough to witness a lot of different types of conscious business, from two-person startups, wearing my sweatpants at home, figuring it out, to, making your first few $100,000, to then scaling, multi-million dollar businesses, two or three of them at the same time. You got 40 to 50 staff globally, to then being CEO of Gaia and taking it from 80 to 100 million in revenue, with a 13-acre, 150,000 square foot campus, and being publicly listed and having my photo on the NASDAQ tower and going to investor conferences. And so seeing this entire spectrum of conscious business, I actually feel that a lot of people are going into business saying, I want to have $100 million business.
Right.
Where I'm telling them, I've seen that, and that might not be in your best interest, right? It's complex, it's difficult. We're entering an era where I believe there will be thousands of micro businesses where you have 2, 4, 5 team, you have AI enabled agents working alongside of you, and you're doing 200K, 500K, a million, 3 million, 5 million. And you have highly profitable, conscious lifestyle businesses that are impacting people, and you're living a better quality life.
That's right.
And I think the biggest trade-off that I've made that I somewhat regret is trading the quality of my life for more money or bigger dollars or bigger impact. Now, I believe that impact is what drives a lot of people. They want to help people. They want to help more people. However, it's a really big question to ask. Do I want to have a $100 million company with $100 million headaches? Or do I want to have a $1 to $2 million company with a better quality lifestyle? And I think that this is a huge opportunity for people that are looking to move into this space. And now is the time, especially with AI. And more people are going to want things that AI can't give. It cannot give connection. It cannot give community. It cannot give intimate healing experiences. Right. And more humans are going to be disenfranchised by this technocratic future that we're imagining, and want to connect more. And they're going to need more people to help them do that. And this is a very exciting time.
I love it. I love it. And impact is such an interesting word, where again, it's no different than the food system, which is quality over quantity. Like, I reached 1 million people. Well, you send them a info product that they never opened. Does that really mean you've really impacted the lives of 1 million? It's much more of holistic transformation and completeness. Like, sometimes it's a little better to go deeper than wider if you're actually looking for real change. And I love that these practitioners can find that right mix for them in a way that gets them back to remembering what do they actually want their life to look like. Because I think a lot of people focus so much on this proving energy of like, I'm going to prove to you that this stuff I'm into right here isn't crazy, and look at how many people I helped. And they forget, like, well, what is the life that you actually want? And what do you want your day to day to look like? And a lot of times people step into entrepreneurship because they want to have a lot of fun. They want to make a lot of money. They want to impact a lot of people, but they forget that if they just focus on one of those, they're going to neglect the other two. And it's cool to see, like, again, it's almost like this new evolution of that ikigai for you within this opportunity. And I love that it's going to be able to impact people who are then going to be able to impact people instead of just the direct to consumer. I think that's pretty cool.
It's the lore of procession, right? It's like the bee thinks it's pollinating the flower, right? And really, I mean, actually, so the bee thinks it's collecting pollen and honey, but it's really doing so much more than that. And I think this concept of lore of procession is something that in the health space is very powerful. If you're able to train healers to deepen their capacity to build communities and retreats and experiences and connection and healing, and do that in a way that helps them to more efficiently build something that gives them a great quality of life that's also sustainable, then you can create a much more powerful impact on the world, in my opinion.
I love it because if you zoom out, we're actually just being groomed by all the plants. We're their food, so
Yeah.
they're like, "Yep,
Yeah.
you guys just eat a little healthier. It's
Yeah.
gonna be better for my diet."
Yeah.
So I want to hit you with just a couple, whatever comes off the top of the dome, rapid fire ones. So we'll roll from here. Just first thing that comes to you: morning ritual you can't live without.
Movement.
One belief you had about success that was completely wrong.
Oh, I'm struggling to wrap it
That's
on
a hard
this
one.
one.
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I'll say it again, just to buy you a little time.
Uh-huh.
One belief you had about success that was completely wrong.
Money equals happiness.
Yeah. A documentary everybody should watch. Come on, this is a softball. Which one of yours?
Transcendence.
Yeah. Nice. A wellness trend that you're skeptical of.
Peptides, but open.
A mentor who shaped your path.
For many.
Yeah.
Jirka Rysavy, founder of Gaia.
Nice. A place in nature that resets your nervous system.
Ocean, for sure.
A future of conscious media in one sentence.
Integrated.
Oof. And legacy, what does that word mean to you?
Planting a garden.
Oof. I love it. I love it. And I'll give got a little spirit bump, so I'll give a little shout out to our mutual friend who connected us, Krista Recchio, on that one, because that's where the world pulled her towards the end, which was all towards soil and regeneration.
Bless her soul.
Yeah, we'll say this
Look
is
at that.
nice little, the clear sentience is full, so bless her soul on that one. I want to give you an opportunity to ask me any question about anything that pops into your awareness or you have some curiosity about.
What do you think is the most important practice or experience that people can have if they're looking to heal? Is it on sound, or is it, belief system restructuring? Is it nutrition still, your roots and mine? If someone came to you and they're looking to improve their life, where do you start? Like, what's like the just do this really well and you'll do great?
Laughter. 100%. Laughter is breath work, right? You're getting in a lot of air when you're laughing. And what it does is it pulls off the Alan Watts philosophy of remembering that this is a play and to not take yourself so seriously. And then from there, you can look at that cosmic dance of not taking yourself too seriously, but taking yourself sacredly. And I think once people take themselves sacredly and not so seriously, then all of these things fall into the alignment of the holistic lifestyle, which is I'm taking myself very sacredly, not too seriously.
I love that. Play of consciousness.
Yeah.
Very cool. What's one health trend that you think is not very healthy?
The human guinea pig mindset of first to market, whatever that may be. I love the entrepreneurial mindset of I'm open and curious and creative, but it's this lemming racing off of the corner. And I worry about things like GLP-1s that people will take where they're just like, I've got this problem and I need to solve it now, when sometimes they're solving for the wrong problem. So it may be great for somebody who's 250, 350, 400, 650 pounds to bring them back to then implement the healthy lifestyle stuff. But is it really worth the sacrificing of muscle if you've got like 9 pounds to lose? I don't know. I don't want to be the guinea pig to try that myself, especially I don't want to lose the muscles in my face and look really, really aged, but hey, my scale weight is down. My first book I wrote was called How Much Does a Zebra Weigh? And the answer to it is, who gives a crap? Like, scale weight's the most meaningless thing ever. If you really even are looking on a superficial level, I've never walked into a nightclub or a bar and started acting like I'm at a circus guessing people's scale weight. So to me, it's the health and the vibrancy and everything like that.
I love that. Powerful.
Well, I just want to thank you for continually walking this inspirational, unconventional path. It's inspiring to me. From day one of meeting you, you've helped me think bigger without even realizing it. And a lot of these paths, sometimes it's hard to think really big and then also think practically. So you're trailblazing, man. I really appreciate it. And if people want to learn more about the next steps of where to follow you, your journey, and also learn about this forthcoming school, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably easiest is follow us on Instagram. So there's Food Matters, and then James Colquhoun, which is my name, Colquhoun. And then also you can go to wellacademy.com and you can join a waitlist there as well. So that's the best.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to check out Well Academy when it comes to market, and already fully all in on all the other philosophies. So grateful our alignment is on point, and this was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Cheers, Kyle.
All right, my friend, if this episode sparked something in you, don't just wander off into the abyss of the internet. Hit subscribe so you can actually get the good stuff when it drops. And if you're feeling generous or mildly enlightened, leave some love in a review. It takes just 30 seconds, and somehow it feeds the algorithm gods so they notice and more people who really need it. Now, if you want to step deeper into my world, rapidharmony.com is where the real magic lives. Coaching, community, rituals, and a few surprises that are way better than just scrolling around another motivational reel and not doing anything about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being you. And remember, your inner harmony isn't hiding. It's just waiting for you to pay attention. I'll see you on the next episode. Now go subscribe before you forget.